Nevara Lang was the internet's golden girl, glamorous, inspiring, and adored by millions. Corbin Thale was the man she left behind, obsessive, quiet, and invisible to the world. But while Nevara's followers were liking her last post, Corbin was inside her apartment, editing videos just a few feet from her decomposing body. And no one had any idea. ChatGPT said Nevara Lang was more than just a content creator. She was a brand, a lifestyle, a vision of peace and perfection on every platform she touched. Her images of golden beaches, vintage cafes, and sunrise yoga captured hearts around the world. With her signature filters and calming captions, Nevara created the illusion of a perfectly balanced life. To her followers, she wasn't just a blogger, she was a muse. But what none of them knew was that behind the screens and serenity, something dark had been slowly closing in on her life. That it all began on a Friday afternoon when her fans noticed she hadn't posted her usual feel-good Friday reel. It was odd but not alarming yet. A few hours later, her Instagram story from the day before vanished without a trace of anything new to replace it. Then came silence. No updates, no tweets, not even a simple repost. At first, fans assumed she was on a wellness retreat. It wouldn't have been the first time Nevara disconnected from the digital world, but this time felt different. Her last post was a photo of her in her Valencia apartment, holding a glass of herbal tea, with the caption, "Sometimes solitude is the loudest scream." Most people thought it was just poetic. By Sunday night, her manager, Luca Morel, became worried. Nevara had an important campaign shoot lined up in Barcelona. She never missed professional commitments, especially with high-paying brands. Luca called her, no answer. He texted, DMED, emailed nothing. On Monday morning, after still hearing nothing, he drove from Barcelona to her apartment in Valencia. The complex was quiet, as always. Her mailbox was full. Luca knocked, waited. Knocked again. Still no sound. He asked the building's concierge to check if she'd been seen recently. No one had. The security guard on duty checked the logs. No known exits since Thursday. Luca requested a wellness check. When police arrived, they found the door unlocked. The apartment was airy and sunlit, with soft music still playing from a Bluetooth speaker. Her laptop was open, sitting on the dining table. A smoothie had melted on the kitchen counter, untouched. At first glance, everything looked normal. Too normal. But something was off. The silence felt dense. A faint metallic odor hung in the air, not strong, but strange. It led them to the bathroom. The door was shut. Inside, the tiles were damp, and the window had been sealed with duct tape from the inside. The light was off. When officers opened it, the scene they found would stay with them for the rest of their careers. Nevara Lang, the image of health and elegance to millions, was on the floor, partially slumped against the side of the bathtub. Her body was bloated and showed early signs of decomposition. A large towel covered most of her torso. Her face was bruised. One hand was curled tightly around the base of a candle. Detectives quickly secured the apartment. Crime scene units entered. Forensic markers were placed on smudges on the walls, stains on the tiles, and items in the bathroom that looked oddly arranged, almost staged. Outside the building, a crowd began to form. A few fans recognized her name on the dispatch radio and stared up at the windows in disbelief. How could this happen to someone like Nevara? But what the public didn't know yet was how long her body had been there. Or that someone had been inside the apartment after she died, and somewhere, far from the scene, a man watched the breaking news unfold on his cracked laptop screen. He didn't blink. He didn't panic. He just continued dragging clips into his video editing timeline, slowly, deliberately. Because for Corbin Thale, this wasn't the end of Nevara's story. It was just the beginning of his. Corbin Thale had once lived in the background of Nevara Lang's bright, curated world. He wasn't an influencer, a model, or a name anyone would recognize. He was the man behind the lens, the freelance editor, who helped stitch together Nevara's picturesque life into perfectly timed reels and polished vlogs. They met during a campaign shoot in Lisbon, where he impressed her with his visual style and soft-spoken demeanor. What started as a professional partnership gradually turned into something more intimate, but uneven. Nevara was always on the move, always followed, always praised. Corbin was quiet, methodical, and used to being invisible. Their relationship lasted a few turbulent months. Nevara ended it when she noticed Corbin had started showing up in places she hadn't told him she'd be. He never raised his voice or caused scenes, he simply appeared. Once at a cafe in Rome, another time at a beach shoot in Santorini. She brushed it off at first as coincidence, but by the third occurrence, she changed her locks, blocked him across all social media platforms, and never spoke of him again. But Corbin never really left. Police began digging into her past relationships, and his name surfaced quickly. At first, there wasn't much to go on. No recent contact, no known threats, no documented altercations. But as detectives searched through digital records, a darker pattern emerged. Corbin had been following Nevara's online activity obsessively. He used burner accounts to watch her stories, cross-referenced background locations to map her movements, and even subscribed to her paid content through fake identities. What disturbed investigators most was the methodical nature of his surveillance. Detectives traced purchases made under his name and discovered he had rented an Airbnb apartment just 3 blocks from Nevara's building 2 weeks before her death. A search warrant was issued. Inside the small rental, they found a basic setup: a mattress on the floor, a small editing station, and stacks of hard drives. Nothing out of place until they opened his laptop. The desktop was cluttered with video files, all named with odd titles like 2 a.m. window, Blue Shirt Tuesday, and Staring Again. Each video was a silent clip of Nevara. Some were clearly taken from public locations, but many were not. Police were able to recover fragments of deleted files. One video stood out. It was titled Final Days. The first half of the footage showed Nevara walking around her apartment, shot from a hidden camera, possibly placed outside her window or through a ventilation shaft. She was brushing her hair, sipping tea, typing on her laptop. Then the footage jumped to shaky handheld clips taken inside the apartment. This part was silent, grainy, and deeply disturbing. A dimly lit shot of Nevara sleeping. Another of her bathroom mirror, fogged up from a recent shower, with a faint outline of a figure standing just behind the doorframe. One clip had a zoom in on her toothbrush. Another lingered for several seconds on a pair of sandals placed neatly on the bedroom floor. There was no evidence of direct violence in the video. But the intent was clear. This was not casual voyeurism. This was a record, a ritual, a kind of collection. Investigators were stunned. They hadn't yet determined the exact cause of Nevara's death, but Corbin had now become the prime suspect. Not just for the stalking, but for something far worse. Was brought in for questioning, calm and compliant. He said little, but as police scrolled through the metadata of the recovered video files, they noticed something chilling. Timestamp showed that Corbin had entered Nevara's apartment multiple times after she was already dead. He hadn't just watched her. He had stayed, and what he did during those long, silent hours in her home would be uncovered piece by piece, each discovery darker than the last. The investigation took a sharper turn once law enforcement acquired the building's security footage. Officers combed through hours of silent hallway recordings from the week Nevara went missing. It was meticulous work, frame by frame. But then, they saw him, Corbin Thale, the same man who claimed he hadn't seen Nevara in months. There he was, wearing a dark hoodie, slipping into the building through the side door at 2:17 a.m., 2 nights before her body was discovered. He was carrying a black backpack. He stayed inside the apartment building for over 11 hours. Then again, just before dawn on another night, He appeared on the footage, leaving quickly and nervously, this time wearing gloves. It wasn't just one visit. He entered Nevara's building 4 separate times in 6 days. What raised even more suspicion was that none of the visits matched any known time of Nevara's usual outings or deliveries. The timeline made it impossible for these visits to be harmless or accidental. Detectives knew now they were dealing with something far more sinister than stalking. But what exactly had he done inside that apartment after Nevara died? A forensic sweep of the scene began anew. They now looked not just for signs of struggle, but for signs of prolonged presence. Hidden camera lenses were discovered inside a potted plant and behind the bookshelf, facing her living room and kitchen. None of these devices had been planted by Nevara. Even more disturbing was what they found on a small flash drive recovered from Corbin's rental. The drive was labeled Nevara Raw. Inside were dozens of edited video files, carefully curated montages of Nevara's life, spliced from past vlogs and private clips. Some were clearly taken without her knowledge. But what disturbed detectives the most wasn't the footage itself, it was how the videos were arranged. Each clip was built around a theme. One titled Morning Routines combined old footage with more recent shots, clearly taken from the window of her apartment in the days leading up to her death. Another, called Peaceful Moments, featured slow-motion segments of her face while she was sleeping, her chest barely rising under a blanket. It was clear now. Corbin hadn't just broken into her home. He had constructed a twisted film project from the aftermath, but there was one particular clip that changed the course of the case. In the middle of a 10-minute compilation called Her Last Week, there was a frame that the editing software had missed trimming. Just 2 seconds long. A mirror shot in her bathroom. The reflection was barely visible in the corner, but it showed Corbin holding the camera himself. Nevara was in the frame too, lying motionless on the bathroom floor. The image was grainy and dark, but the timestamp was unmistakable. It had been taken 3 days after the coroner's estimated time of death. This changed everything. Corbin hadn't just stumbled upon the body. He hadn't just filmed from a distance. He had entered the apartment knowingly, filmed Nevara after death, and stayed long enough to edit the material while her body decomposed just a few feet away. Detectives returned to Nevara's apartment with forensic specialists. They noticed subtle changes: a curtain that had been moved, a mug that was clean despite the dusty kitchen, a scented candle recently burned down. He had tried to make the apartment feel normal, as if time hadn't passed, as if she were still alive. The reality was even more haunting. Corbin had used Nevara's home not as a crime scene to flee, but as a stage he returned to. Again and again, he wasn't hiding what he had done. He was documenting it, curating it. And in his mind, he was still making content, still editing, still telling a story, but this time, it wasn't Nevara's story. It was his. When the forensics team re-examined the bathroom where Nevara's body was found, they noticed new anomalies that hadn't stood out during the initial investigation. There were faint streaks on the floor tiles, the kind that suggested a body had been dragged. But not immediately. There had been repositioning. Her body hadn't fallen and stayed where it landed. It had been moved multiple times. Her head injury was severe, a blunt force trauma consistent with something heavy, like a tripod or metal bar. But the bruising patterns around her wrists and neck didn't quite match a single struggle. They told a longer story, one of post-mortem interference. On the mirror, there was a smudge barely visible to the naked eye. Under ultraviolet light, a chilling phrase appeared, etched faintly in what turned out to be a mixture of lotion and some unknown powder. "Now you can't leave me." The faucet had been dripping when the police found her, and forensics found evidence that the sink had been run continuously at one point. Water consumption reports from the building confirmed that, during the week between her death and discovery, there were unusual water usage spikes in the middle of the night. That could only mean one thing: Someone had been using her bathroom. Detectives pieced together a deeply unsettling theory. Corbin hadn't just returned to the apartment. He had used the space as if it were still occupied by Nevara. The repositioning of the body, the fresh burn mark on the scented candle, the water usage, and the scented oil rubbed into her hair, these weren't random acts. They were signs of an obsessive, delusional routine. He was preserving her, not just physically, but in his mind, emotionally. Crime scene analysts discovered that the air vents had been sealed with duct tape, reducing airflow in the bathroom. Combined with the closed windows and locked door, it created a humid, slow-decaying environment, one that Corbin may have deliberately engineered. When asked why, Dr. Roland Vesk, the forensic pathologist, explained it in chilling terms. He wasn't ready to let her go, not in life, not even in death. The autopsy revealed the presence of skin fibers and chemical residue under Nevara's nails, possibly from a struggle, but not a fatal one. Her cause of death was confirmed as head trauma, but the timeline placed that trauma around 3 a.m. on a.m. A Tuesday. Corbin was seen leaving the building at 4:07 a.m. that same night, and then there was the final layer, the edited footage he had exported. Investigators found one video scheduled to post on Nevara's private vlog channel, which only close collaborators had access to. It was set to go live 1 week after her death. It was titled, "Taking Time to Heal." The video began with soft music and old footage of Nevara smiling on a mountain trail. It transitioned into shots clearly taken after her death, color-corrected, and cut to appear as if she were simply tired or lying down peacefully. The last shot lingered on a bathroom door slightly ajar, then faded to black. He had been working on this while her body was in the next room. What Corbin had done wasn't just physical. It was psychological. It was ritualistic. He had blurred the line between Nevara's real self and her online image, and when she rejected him in life, he refused to accept it. He edited her death into a story that made sense to him. Detectives concluded that Corbin's repeated returns weren't just to relive the crime, but to reshape it, to reframe the horror into something beautiful, something permanent. The apartment, once a place of calm and creativity, had become a silent studio, a set for the final act of a narrative only one person was watching. And the worst part? He had scheduled her goodbye, as if she had planned it herself. The story of Nevara Lang's death spread quickly across news outlets, social media platforms, and fan forums. The influencer world was in shock. Millions mourned the loss of a young woman who had, in their eyes, embodied peace, beauty, and purpose. Her curated life had been a source of comfort for so many, yet behind the filters and captions, the horror that had unfolded was something no one could have imagined. Corbin Thale was arrested at a small co-working space where he had continued editing footage even after being named a person of interest. When the officers approached him, he didn't resist. In fact, he didn't seem surprised. He simply closed his laptop and looked up as if he had been expecting them. His laptop was seized and became one of the most important pieces of evidence. On it, forensic IT experts found hundreds of project files. Some were completed, while others were still in progress. In one folder labeled Post-in, investigators found a final edit, one that had been queued for upload the following week. The file name was haunting. Forever Nevara. The video was quiet. It opened with her earliest travel clips, soft transitions, music she used in her earliest vlogs. It slowly transitioned into dimmer shots, clips of candlelight, bathroom tiles, and blurred images that looked like they had been filmed through foggy glass. The final frame was a still image of her apartment window. Behind the curtain, barely visible, was the silhouette of a figure sitting alone. It was clear now that Corbin had tried to create a digital afterlife for Nevara, crafting an illusion where she never left, where their connection never broke, and where he could continue to control how her story was told. Detective Elira Khan described the case as the most disturbing she had ever encountered. Not only because of the gruesome nature of the death, but because Corbin had transformed grief into a creative project. He didn't run from what he had done. He documented it, shaped it, and tried to release it into the world like a final collaboration. The trial was swift. Corbin was charged with first-degree murder, unlawful surveillance, desecration of a corpse, and digital harassment. His defense attempted to argue diminished mental capacity, citing obsessive delusional disorder and parasocial fixation. But the prosecution countered with hard evidence, timelines, footage, and the eerie precision with which he executed his plan. The court played parts of the recovered videos during the proceedings. Jurors wept. Some had to leave the room. The public learned details that hadn't been released before, like how Corbin had fed her cat during one of his late-night visits, and how he had left voice memos for her as if she could still hear him. He was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Yet the story didn't end there. Nevara's fans, shattered by the revelations, started revisiting her old videos. A strange trend emerged. Viewers began to notice small flickers in her final few uploads, reflections in windows, subtle changes in lighting, the shape of a face barely visible in a mirror. A growing number believed that Corbin had already begun inserting himself into her content before her death, altering it frame by frame like a slow invasion. Several followers claimed to hear faint breathing in the background of her last video. Others said they spotted shadows moving independently behind her. Whether these were real or imagined didn't matter. A myth had taken hold that Nevara had been trying to tell them something, and no one listened in time. Despite being taken down and scrubbed from most platforms, copies of the Forever Nevara video still float across hidden forums and dark corners of the internet. Many warn not to watch it alone, because what started as a true crime became something else, a haunting reminder of how the digital world can blur the lines between admiration and obsession, memory and manipulation, life and death. In the end, Nevara Lang became immortal, not in the way she had hoped, but in the way Corbin had planned.